All right, good morning, everybody. Also want to welcome the folks that are virtual on Facebook, so welcome. Today we're going to just do a quick fire update, what's going on with the fire overall. We'll have some folks speak to the chronology and how we got from the start to where we are today, overall strategy of the fire, quick fire update, hopefully a fly around if our tech works so you guys can see the ground. And then Sheriff Harold will also be on to talk a little bit about evacuation updates. Gwen from Oakridge Air is also here to talk about smoke. So before we get going, let me explain how we're going to do this, the format of the meeting. So we will take questions over Facebook after the formal presentations, and then once we're done with those Facebook questions, we'll close out the virtual portion of the meeting, and then we'll move to an open house format where you all, those of you who are here in person, will have a chance to visit with our team members and forest officials one-on-one. So we'll make ourselves available after that virtual portion is closed. So I also just wanted to acknowledge a few folks that are with us today, both here in the room and virtually. Wanted to let folks know that Ian Reed, the agency administrator for the Willamette National Forest, is here with us today. Dwayne Bishop, the forest supervisor, is here with us virtually. Randy Johnson, incident commander. John Tipley, our operations chief, as well as James Osborne, another operations chief. Clifton Harold, your sheriff, again virtual, coming to us virtually. Gwen, I'm going to mess up your last name. Gwen from Oakridge Air is here with us as well. Heather Buck, your Lane County Commissioner, is here in the room. Chris, I guess I didn't see Chrissy or Scott. I thought they might be here. And then virtually, Norm McDonald, incident commander for the Alaska Type 1 team, and Sam Harrell, PIO for the Alaska team, will be standing by if you guys have any questions about the east side of the fire. All right, let's get going. Ian, I'll grab you, can come up here and provide that context of the fire.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dan. Good morning, everybody. So my name is Ian Reed. I'm agency administrator representing the Willamette National Forest for the Cedar Creek Fire. Just wanted to talk a little bit about how we got here, but first, I just wanted to say that we really empathize with what you're going through as a community. We feel it. We thank you for your patience and your support for the last 47 days, and particularly the last week. So we got here, how we got here was August 1st. We had a large lightning storm that swept the northwest. There were over 3,500 strikes that hit Oregon. Most of those fires were picked up quickly in the initial attack phase, but some ended up in really tough spots, and Cedar Creek Fire was one of those. And so it was staffed with resources right off the bat. Repellers were ordered, and they actually turned it down because it was too dangerous. But there were resources assigned to that fire within the first couple days, and there was aircraft on it, there was retardant with heavy air tankers, there were heavy helicopters dropping water, and there were ground resources on that fire. It was in a really steep, dangerous spot, and the fire kept growing. And when LCES is not available, which is lookouts, communications, escape routes, and safety zones, firefighters can't engage. And so those firefighters backed off, and at day 3, a Type 1 incident management team, which is the best of the best, which is what you have here today, that was ordered. And so that happened early on day 3 of this fire, so it would have been about August 4th. And then over the next month and a half, multiple incident management teams kept rotating through trying to get a hold on this fire. But the terrain proved to be super difficult. The hazards were there, the snags, the steep terrain, and as you all are probably aware, there were 2 firefighters killed over the last 2 years on the Middle Fork Ranger District due to tree strikes. And so those incident management teams kept working on strategies, working to fully suppress that fire, but doing it in a safe manner. And then on September 1st, the fire made a large run to the north there on the west side of Waldo Lake. And then in September 7th, and then it started to spread out to the east. And so the Deschutes National Forest also became involved with that, spread onto the Deschutes. And then September 7th, as you all know, just several days ago, we had the large east wind events that really pushed that fire back to the west toward the communities of Oakridge. So for the whole time of this fire, the number one priority, the number one value at risk has been the communities of Oakridge, West Fir, and High Prairie. The second most important value at risk was the Highway 58 corridor and Union Pacific Railroad. And then Waldo Lake was also a high value at risk. And then as the Deschutes National Forest was involved, other values over there, such as the Crescent Lake Junction area, which would include Odell and Crescent Lake and Cascade Lakes Highway. So that was overall strategy. It's really important to note that the local firefighters here on the Willamette National Forest and the Middle Fork Ranger District, they were engaged with this fire the entire time. They were really trying to figure out how to get around it safely as well, with the assistance of incident management teams and other folks. Put their heart and soul into this thing. I know your local district ranger here, Molly Chularot, she has worked tirelessly over the last 47 days to provide leadership to her employees and to the community and support to the incident management team. So folks are very committed to this, really engaged, and this is if you include the Alaska Type 1 team, I think this is the 5th incident management team that has been brought in to help manage this fire. And like I said, they're the best of the best. So with that said, the last thing I'd just like to close on is that it's not over. I mean, there's a lot of good work, and you'll hear about it here today. We're in a much better place than we were a week ago. But, there are other east wind events that come up in September. It's supposed to be we're going to get some precip today, and then we'll back into the 80s potentially next week. So just to stay vigilant, you all know if you live here that we're not out of the woods quite yet. So, but again, thank you so much for your support, your patience. Hope to chat with you after this meeting is over face to face. So thanks.
All right, thanks, Ian. I did fail to mention that Tom Ritter with the Red Cross is also here with us today. Thanks for being here, Tom. Next up, Randy Johnson, Incident Commander. Kind of give us an overall strategy of the fire.
Thank you, Stan. Good morning, everyone. Thanks again for your time. Yeah, you're probably getting tired of my face. I was questioned when I first walked in. One of the folks here said, "Didn't I just see you on the internet this morning?" And I apologize for that, how much time you've had to deal with me. But we have had the honor of serving your community a number of times. We were here last year. We were here once already on this fire, and we're back now, and we're going to keep doing it till we get it right, if that works for you. We continue to look for the things that are most important to you as we're here. So Ian touched on a couple of things, so I'll talk on just a few points here about strategy for this incident, the overall strategy, and it's really a combination of that indirect and direct strategy, meaning where we can't get tight to the fire with firefighters on the ground, the 1 foot in the black that we like to do. We look for that more removed opportunity away from the fire line, but yet in an area where we can put firefighters with the least amount of exposure to them as possible from all those hazards that Ian mentioned, the gravity hazards and the things that have been really a challenge to work with the last number of years, especially in this fuel type on the Middle Fork District. So it's that modified or that combined strategy of direct and indirect. When we were here a couple weeks ago on assignment, we took the opportunity to do some direct strategy out in the Waldo Lake area on that east side of the fire. We put crews in and put them in spike camps in the wilderness, working with the district and working with the forest to get approvals to do that kind of work and make as light an impact as possible, but yet take advantage of some fuels and some terrain that allowed us to go direct. And so we used that. weather came up, after we were transitioning out and challenged those lines, and those didn't end up holding as well as we would like. So that brings me to another point that we consider, our ops guys consider routinely, is we don't want to build dumb fire line. We don't want to put firefighters at risk and build line if we don't have a reasonable probability of success. We'll balance that. We saw an opportunity with that particular section that we were comfortable with the risk associated with the potential benefit of grabbing that piece of line, so we did that. We continue to do those things wherever possible. It's just that there's not a lot of opportunity to do that in this country. So we still are doing a lot of indirect strategy and grabbing road systems, grabbing ridge lines, doing the things that we can to ultimately, in an effort to reduce the risk and the threat to those values at risk that Ian mentioned. Oakridge, the communities, the highway corridor, the railroad corridor, those things, and the firefighters, life safety. So a lot of what you've been seeing the last few days are some firing operations that we've been conducting. One of the things that I will touch on too is the question we get, we received it when we were here a week ago, how come it's still 0% contained? That's a fair question. It's a good question. One of the things that we continue to attempt to be better at is communicating what's actually happening on the ground. We are conditioned as a society and as individuals that live in an environment with fire that black line on the edge of the fire measured in percent of that perimeter is what we look for, percent of containment. We're pretty deliberate about what we consider contained and the conditions that need to be in place before we're going to put that black line on the map and call it contained. There's some definitions, and there's a lot of experience that tell us when it's okay to do that. So we're pretty conservative about putting black line on the map and saying that's contained. That doesn't mean there's not a lot of work being done. So we're working on strategies for us, and how do we communicate that? Percent of completion is a way we're looking at another way to communicate that. That would speak more to the work that's being done. So with those firing operations that have been going on that ops will talk about, really it's in an effort to take the potential, reduce the potential as much as possible of the fire getting organized, getting aligned, like what we saw last weekend before, when conditions were right with weather and fire alignment to cause the evacuation of your community. So we're attempting to take as much of the fuel out as possible that would prevent that alignment from happening again. And how we show that percent of completion is a little different than percent of containment. So I ask for patience and I ask for good questions, and I know you folks will do that when we get to that point, and let us help to explain a little better what we're doing on the ground out there. And I can assure you there is a lot of work being done. There is a lot of contingency lines that have been prepped. There are a lot of opportunities that the firefighters have today to protect this community that weren't there 10 days ago, 14 days ago, a month ago. So progress is being made. It's just difficult to demonstrate it on a map in a fashion that we're used to seeing it. So hang in there with us. We're gonna do a better job of communicating that, but it'll come down to a lot of conversation is the best way we can communicate that. So that's a little bit about the 0% containment piece. One of the things associated with the firing operations that we've been doing is you probably noticed today that there was a jump in acreage. Now there's a couple reasons for that. Some of that is the firing that we've been doing. A big piece of it is we have been unable to receive the infrared flight that we usually get every night that shows us where fire perimeter is, where the fire growth is. Those flights have not been happening the last, I believe we were down 4 days in a row. Yeah, 4 days that we didn't get the IR flight, the infrared flight. So we got one last night, so it was catching up on a lot of what had happened for the previous 4 days, which resulted in a jump in acreage that you see that we're reporting. So it's all with intent, like I said, to remove that fuel and remove the alignment potential for this fire to make another run at the community. So it's progress. It's percent of completion, while it doesn't show as percent of containment. So those are just a few things about what we're up to. Again, honored to serve the community and looking to continue to take the threat away as much as we can, and also looking for where we're at with the season and what makes sense to continue exposing firefighters out there as well, knowing that we've got a lot of good work in place, and we're going to have some opportunities with weather that'll be more in our favor as we get farther into the season. We've also heard very loud and clear from folks that are well versed in this country. The way that it was relayed to me that resonated with my simple brain was it's threes. Fire season's over on the middle fork of the Willamette, as it was relayed to me, when one of two things have happened. We've had 3 east wind events, or we've had 3 inches of rain. So we've had 1 east wind event. We're watching that stuff closely. We've got really good meteorologists watching that, and we're trying to forecast that out as far in advance as we can, and know that we're still in fire season until those things happen or something else changes that we're unaware of. So again, appreciate your patience, appreciate your interest in what we're doing, and as Stan said, I'll be around after this. We can have some one-on-one conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Randy. Next up is John Tipley, one of our operations sections chief. He'll give us an update on what's happening on the fire today, and hopefully a flyover with our tech. So we'll see how that goes.
Thanks, Stan. Morning, everybody. Like Stan said, my name is John Tipley. I'm one of the operations section chief with the team here. Happy to spend the morning with you, spend some time talking with you afterwards. If you have any questions, please come find me, also with the Facebook group. So anyways, we've got a couple products we're going to share with you today. First of all, we're going to do a little tactical strategic overview of the map, what we got going on, what we have planned for the next few days. And then once we get around that, hit on a few key points, and then we're going to move into a Google Earth flyover of the area and kind of talk about some fuels, some of the topography, some of the challenges that we've been facing out there with our guys and with our plan, and why we ended up where we're at now, and what Randy was talking about, the probability of success, and how we ended up there. So I'm going to start up north in what we call Division Delta. On our fires, we usually break things out into geographic areas, and we assigned divisions to them, and then we identify them with letters. So Division Delta up there for the next few days, probably for the next week or better. We've got a bunch of equipment in there, some hand crews, and we're doing some prep work along that 19 corridor, getting that prepared to use as a potential containment line in the future if we need to utilize that. Moving over into Division Alpha to the west, we got that 19 corridor there as well. We're going to continue with the prep operations in there, utilizing some heavy equipment, logging equipment, hand crews, and some engines. There's also some opportunity in there where we can go in a little bit tighter and pick up some of that stuff before it actually gets on the 19 road. So a lot of that stuff is being assessed as we go along as well. Moving over there to the Division Alpha Yankee break, that's been a lot of our focus for the past few days. That was the leading edge of the fire. There was a piece of fire that spread out there ahead of the main edge of the fire during that initial large run a week ago, and back down in there into the North Fork and the Middle Fork, and was kind of giving us some fits there, making us really focus on that. It's very steep terrain. It's all old growth. It's so steep it's never been logged, if you can imagine that around here. So that gives you some context of what the terrain looks like. So put a lot of emphasis in that area, put a lot of effort into that, prepping that out, getting that 19 road ready for a holding feature that we could utilize. And then moving into Division Yankee, that Huckleberry OHV area, that's been probably our biggest success that we've had in the past week. Did a lot of interior firing over the past couple days, utilizing the helicopter and our plastic sphere dispenser for aerial ignitions. That's been a key component for our operation up there as well. We do have a fair bit of hotshot crews as well, Type 1 hand crews. They've been in there. We've been utilizing them to help with some of that interior firing as well, and also bringing the fire down along that 2409 road. So that road that goes in the Huckleberry OHV area. So that's all looking really good. That's been one of our biggest successes that we've had so far. And moving forward, we have a lot of folks in there. We're working on securing all that stuff now, making sure it's going to stay in place, dealing with any of the snag hazards and stuff like that along our containment feature as well. So moving south from there, south of Salmon Creek, south of the branch break there where see those two goalposts, Division X-ray, and this is another challenging spot for us. So we've had some difficult times with the weather and the smoke setting in for us to be able to do any type of aerial ignition. So we're a little bit behind on that, but with the weather and things coming in, we're going to do what we can over the next day, and then we're going to monitor from there. But those pieces of fire that you see in there, those heat signatures, that's all from our hotshot crews. So we're going in there and we're trying to light as much as we can by hand. So we're being very proactive in there, trying to get as much of that filled in between there and then the 5871 road that we're using for that containment feature from there all the way up to the Salmon Creek Road, from that number 70 right there down by the railroad off of Quisquis Road. So they're continuing with that operation there. That 5871 road is well prepped. We've taken a lot of material out of there. We got several log decks actually stacked up out there, and it's looking really good. So as long as we get the conditions and the favorable weather, we're going to continue with that operation and really push forward on trying to get that secured and burned out down to that 5871 road where we have the best chance for success. Continuing down to the south and east, our Division Whiskey there. So that is the Mccreary Springs Campground along the railroad, just to the north of the Highway 58 corridor. Operation's been really successful in there as well, and there's been a lot of coordination between our folks on the ground and with the railroad as well. Railroad has been gracious enough to bring out their water train, I want to call it. I'm not sure what the correct terminology is, but they got 100,000 gallons of water on it and some water cannons that can shoot up to 200 feet. So that's been a really, really neat tool that we've been allowed to utilize as well. So what we got going on out there for our operation in particular, that fire's back down all the way down to our containment line there. It's looking really good. Got guys in there securing that, hand crews and engines. And then we're also moving up to the north and west there. You see that fire. That's all from, again, our hotshot crews in there lighting that stuff interior, bringing it down to our containment line there where we're going to have our greatest chance of success, keeping it off the Highway 58 corridor and essentially out of the community of Oakridge if there's another east wind event. Moving out to the east, where you see that number 82 there, that gets us into our division uniform up along the Eagle Creek Road. That's looking really good. We've done a lot of prep work in there on that road, preparing it for being a holding feature. It's, again, one of our locations that we've identified where we're going to have a great chance of success, and we've put a lot of effort into that over the past probably over a month now. Work has been going into there. So that's looking really good, and we have a hotshot crew that's been up in there by that where that number 89 is by Fuji Mountain Trailhead, and we've done some firing actions in there, created a holding feature, improving that trail that goes up the Fuji Mountain, and using that for what we want to call a checking feature to bring fire down to the Eagle Creek Road, and then we're going to continue to proceed to the west. And you can see that there's a little strip between the fire's edge there and the Eagle Creek Road. So our goal is to continue west with that firing action and eventually fill that all in, utilizing hand crews and aerial delivered firing devices. So for Division Tango, we've had a lot of discussion on this. We've looked at it from several different ways, looked at several different actions, had lots of discussion on risk to firefighters, where our greatest chance for success is, and where we're going to be able to have that great probability of success. So keeping in mind that we have to utilize our hotshot crews to kind of take care of our primary objectives out to the west, protecting the community of Oakridge and the 58 corridor, we developed a plan that we're prepared to implement if the weather does not come up and it gets dry. So We have a strategy to build some containment line from that 89 number there at the Fuji Mountain Trailhead over to the Waldo Lake Road. So we're going to utilize some mechanized equipment, some logging equipment there. We're going to do what makes sense. We're not going to get overly zealous with that effort. We're going to do what we're going to do. That's going to give us the greatest probability of success in there. So that's kind of our strategy there. And that kind of gives us a walk around the fire for the most part. Touching on a few key points, Waldo Mountain Lookout is still standing. It's looking good. We got some eyes on it. James flew it. Got some pictures of it. Also, so is Huckleberry Mountain Lookout. That stuff's all looking good. It's all standing, still solid structures. Utilized a lot of effort in there. We did a lot of prep in there on Waldo. Flew retardant and a number of things to help protect that structure up there on top of the Waldo Mountain. As far as the east zone, I'm not really going to speak to that. That's not where we're focused right now. So I think from there we can move into our flyover. Give us a couple seconds here, folks. All right, so kind of give you a large overview here. There's right down below where it says Div X there, that would be community of Oakridge. And if we can zoom in a little closer, there we go. This will kind of give you guys a feel about how steep the terrain is. So there you can see some of the relief and how steep that country is. So you guys are well aware how big these mountains are, how tall the timber is, and how deep these drainages are. So as you can tell, there's a lot of risk associated with that and getting people in there on the ground. And this is why we ended up on these pieces of ground where we're going to find the greatest probability of success for our efforts. Yep, there's the Huckleberry OHV area, so that's a nice piece of ground there for us to work. That's all looking really good through there. Moving out to the north, we'll keep on coming around here. You see some of those old logging units in there. That's really helped out with some of the moderation of our fire as well. And then coming back down into the North Fork of the Middle Fork there, that's where it starts dropping off a little bit steeper. Continuing around to the north and east there. And that was that leading edge of that fire a couple days ago, and that's where we were having some difficulties hanging on to, or not hanging on to anything, but where we were focusing a lot of our efforts because we had some concerns about working people in there with that steep ground, with the tall timber up there on the slope, and with the gravity hazards that are there for our folks. So we focused a lot of efforts in there. And that little piece right there above the North Fork and the Middle Fork, that green pocket of timber, that's still one of the areas that we're going to try and continue with our burn operations and bring that down to that North Fork and the Middle Fork to continue to lock that off and protect the community. Continuing around to the east, similar situation. It's back down in there, down to the valley bottom, but this is where we're also focusing a lot of our efforts with the heavy equipment and hand crews, getting that road really looking good, removing the fuels and getting it ready for any type of firing operation and to utilize that as a holding feature. A lot of good effort out there. A lot of our local contractors and stuff have been really key to that operation out there as well. I feel like they're kind of some of the unsung heroes. They don't get a lot of mention. A lot of the focus gets put on our firemen and hotshot crews, but the contractors, honestly, they're key to our operation. So as you can see there, that gives you a good idea about how steep that terrain is and why we ended up down in those drainage bottoms or along the ridge tops. So continuing around, let's back all the way out to, there we go. Let's go around clockwise. Perfect. So there's Waldo Lake there to the east. The old burn scar from the Charlton from, was that 15 years ago, I want to say. 96. Okay. All right. Time slipping by. Anyways, so there's Waldo, and if we move around, continuing clockwise down there by the V, Division Victor, that's kind of where our operation picks back up. There's that Black Creek right there that we were working on when we were here our first time, and you can kind of see why that was such a difficult spot for us to work when we were trying to pick that up direct, going up that slope. We had a couple folks walk down, and it was incredibly steep. It was too steep to put our folks in there to really put something in of meaning. So we did the best that we could there, and then eventually, unfortunately, the weather changed, and we're out here where we're at now. So this is that Division Tango piece. There's Mount Fuji right there in the middle of your screen. And you can see the heat signatures there from where the hot shots have improved that trail down to what we're calling our drop point 89 along Eagle Creek Road, and where they've brought fire, continued those burnout operations along Eagle Creek Road. That's all looking pretty good too. So again, this is why we ended up there. It's the greatest chance for success that we have to keep it out of the Highway 58 corridor. So a couple more spots we'll touch on here, and then we'll wrap it up. So keeping on moving to the west now, dropping down in Eagle Creek proper right there. That's where our Division W starts, and that's where they're going to keep working on bringing fire down to our containment feature right there along the railroad. So the thing that we're going to have to, our biggest hurdle that we're going to have to deal with over the next few days is going to be the weather. You guys have all seen it. You know the rain is coming, and the humidity's come up with that as well, and that's going to be a challenge for us to conduct our firing operations. So that's going to be something that we're going to have to continue to monitor. So that's Division W, and that's where we got the hotshot crews in there. That's all hand-let ignitions in there. They've hiked their guys in there. We've come down ridges. We've done as much as we can in there by hand. So now we have to wait until we get the conditions to get the aerial delivered firing devices up there. And then that's coming back into Salmon Creek there with the Division X-ray, and where we're going to look to be hopefully tying that off and come back in to Division Yankee. So that's our fire in a nutshell, and our tactics and our strategy in a nutshell. So if you have any questions, please post, and I'll be around to answer them afterwards. Thank you.
Thanks, John. All right, next up is Sheriff Harold, and we'll just wait a bit here to get him on Zoom. And Sheriff, you could unmute and put your camera on, that'd be great.
All right. Hey, thanks everybody. Sheriff Cliff Harold here. Just a quick review as far as evacuations go. You know, early on when this fire was going, we had our Sheriff Search and Rescue folks plugged in. We deployed volunteers out into campgrounds and areas around Waldo for evacuations, but there at that time wasn't significant evacuations disrupting residential structures. Obviously last weekend when that east wind event was forecasted, then we really put things into high gear. We located right there embedded with the fire management team so that we had up to the minute information as that event impacted the fire, and eventually needed to make those hard decisions to go all the way up to a level 3 evacuation for Oakridge and Westford. And just want to thank the community for the way you responded to that. I want to assure you that lots and lots of folks were communicating and putting a lot of thought into that when we did that. And I personally really recognize what a big deal it is to make a level 3 evacuation and ask people to separate themselves from their homes. And I definitely don't take that lightly. But also, we've learned a lot in Lane County over the last 3 years. And as I've mentioned in a previous public meeting, you know, my experience on the McKenzie Highway during the Holiday Farm Fire and seeing the devastation there, seeing our folks trying to do evacuations when fire was basically right on top of them. I'm so thankful that this event gave us more planning time and more opportunity to be prepared and thoughtful about the evacuation. So, and again, just say thank you to the community. You did a terrific job. The evacuation went very smoothly from our perspective. Super pleased that we were able to lift those levels back up after the weather event ended, and super pleased that everybody in town there is in a level 1 now. I do want to assure you that the county is keeping our eyes on this. We're staying plugged in, the relationships, the communication, all of that, so that should the weather change here in the next week and cause the situation to require it, then we're prepared to be able and ready to notify the community and to implement the plan again. I recognize your community, has been dealing with this for 2 years now. That has given us significant opportunity to plan, and we saw the fruition of those plans here last week, and we've got a good plan moving forward also. So with that, I'll just be around for any online questions later. Thanks.
Thank you, Sheriff. Next up is Glenn from Oakridge Air.
Hi everybody, thank you for coming out. And unlike last time, I kind of have more of an agenda that I really want to make sure I hit on. So we all made it through that east wind event, which is really good, but we're still feeling the impacts of smoke in our community. Today is a really good example where smoke is lingering in from those nighttime downslope winds, and we don't have the west wind probably blowing hard enough to push it out. So we have cleaner airspaces that are open. Right now it's just the public library, which I think Sarah said she can post the hours in the chat, but it's important to note that those hours can get extended and provide more respite for people. But the other thing is we can also open another cleaner airspace if the need arises. And during the fire, kind of all the really smoky events last week, we had the Baptist Church open, and then we also had the multi-purpose room at the high school on standby if there was a need. So a really good way to stay informed about this stuff is you can follow our website, oakridgeair.org, but probably the best way is to sign up for the texting service, and I'll repeat the phone number twice, and it'll get dropped in the chat. But the phone number is 541-543, let me slow down, 541-543-2019. And again, it's 541-543-2019. And to that phone number, you text Oakridge Air and just hit send. And again, what you text to that number is Oakridge Air. And that signs you up for our text alerts, which we were able to utilize to tell people, hey, the smoke's really bad, these are our cleaner airspaces. But those cleaner airspaces became the evacuation points for buses. So it was really great that we were able to share that information to people on our texting chain. The other thing is we're able to share out stuff about smoke, how to protect yourself, all really important. The other thing I wanted to note here is talking about FireWise. I'm sure people are seeing the need to maybe FireWise their homes, do some home hardening. So if you do any of that work, especially since the fire has happened, please log your hours at our website. And that's oakridgeair.org, I think, /FireWise. It's also on the Southern Willamette Forest Collaborative's website. And the whole process, well, not the whole process, but our grant thing for Firewise restarts in November. So the more hours that get logged, the better for the community, because those hours can become matched for grant funding to help people who can't do that work themselves. I also want to be around to address questions after this, so please don't hesitate to come up and ask me questions. Ask me to add you to a list for email or whatever. The other question we have already had is about purple air monitors and potentially getting one up in High Prairie. I'd say we have one that is available, but there are no public buildings up on High Prairie, so someone would need to kind of volunteer their house to host it. The other thing is, anybody can purchase a purple air monitor themselves, and it can hook into that fire.airnow.gov website. It's not going to be exact GPS location in case that is a worry for somebody, but that can help inform that smoke map, essentially. And I think I actually hit on all my things. So please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask me. Thank you.
Thanks, Gwen. Next up is Commissioner Buck to give some closing remarks. Commissioner?
Thank you. I'm Heather Buck. I'm Lane County Commissioner for East Side, or District 5. This is a complex fire. We have 3 counties involved. We have Lane, Deschutes, and Klamath has been in many of our conversations to see, how it's going to affect them if it goes south in direction. Also, we have, over 1,000 firefighters, contractors, and others in each side of the event. 2 incident management teams and multiple teams that go over and turn out every few weeks. They're all working on our behalf. We know that they are in and out of your community, and you have a lot of folks here. So again, we thank you so much for your patience and your support of all the firefighters and other first responders that are in your community working so hard to keep you safe. At this point, we're going to turn it over to some questions and answers.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, we'll move now to the Facebook question and answer time. And those on Facebook, if you want to post a question, please do that in the comments. So we have a few questions here, and let's see. You know what? I think we're going to start with the East Zone. So Incident Commander Norm McDonald and or Sam Harold, there are a couple of questions for you guys on the East Side. All right. First question is, any news on North Wallow Campground? Did it burn?
Yeah, what I can tell you is we had people in there the last 3 days. A lot of the campground infrastructure was not impacted by the fire, so we have engine crews working in there to protect everything around there and to keep whatever fire is left from encroaching on the campground. So a lot of people in there for the next few days securing that, but it was looking really good as of yesterday afternoon.
All right, thanks. And one more question for you. How much effort is being made on the Cascade Lakes Highway to hold that line if the fire made its way to Lapine?
Yeah, the 46 is our primary, or the Cascade Highway is our primary holding line for the east side. So we've had people in there for the last 2 weeks working. I drove that just the other night. It's making really good progress. Our focus is on where it's the highest probability of that fire impacting the highway. And that's, you can see as where the fire is on the furthest east, making that push out. So that there's a lot of work in there. That's our primary focus. And we're, talking to our operations folks, we're looking at about 6 to 8 days of work to really get that cleaned up in there and buttoned up. But it's going well. And with a little lull in the weather and expected shot of precip tonight, that buys us time to get that really tightened up and ready for whatever next weather event might come in the following weeks.
Actually, one more question, Norm. This one is related to evacuations on your side of the hill. I'm not sure if it's Klamath or Deschutes County, but if the fire jumps Cascade Lakes Highway, is Lapine going to be put into a level 1? And I'm sure you can't answer that now, but you might explain what you guys go through in determining when to evacuate.
Yeah, for any evacuation and fire movement, we would coordinate closely with the corresponding county and make that decision, and that would be a decision between the county sheriff and managers and emergency management to elevate those as needed. Right now, those are not, but that's something we watch closely. If the fire makes progression and there's any chance to threat of the public, we would have those conversations with the county and make some decisions based on fire behavior and potential from that point on.
All right, thank you, Norm. Appreciate you being ready for these questions. Sheriff Harold, if we can get you back online, I think we've got one question for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, the question is, just got a notice that North Waldo Lake was put on evacuation level 3. Can you tell us why?
We haven't made any evacuation level adjustments today or yesterday, so I would have to have a little more information about that.
Okay, and we know that that area's been evacuated for some time now, I believe. All right, thank you, Sheriff. Let's see. Gwen, I'll ask you to come up. A couple questions for you regarding smoke. Let's see, the first one is, did the wind change again? Oakridge is more smoky.
It's not that the wind has changed, as in there's more east winds coming. Pretty much every night, wind patterns change from upslope winds, meaning the wind's blowing up the mountain, to downslope winds at nighttime, the wind's going down the mountain. It's not strong, but there's somewhat of an inversion that's happening, which is what Oakridge is really known for and why we have problems with smoke. And that inversion is holding because it's cloudy, and also we don't have a strong west wind pushing that smoke out of the valley. So generally, kind of what we were seeing before the evacuation orders, we would get morning smoke that would clear out in the afternoon when the sun came out. That could potentially happen today if it warms up a little bit, but just be prepared for smoke.
One more question for you, and it's related. I think you answered the question in your previous discussion, but you might want to reiterate where they can get the latest information on smoke.
Yeah, so the latest information on smoke is, of course, you can follow the smoke monitors at fire.airnow.gov. You can also follow the Air Resource Advisors, which comes out with the Cedar Creek Facebook page and announcements every day. That'll give kind of the overview of what is expected today or that day. You can also always look at our website, oakridgeair.org/smoke, and that leads to a purple air monitor. Well, not the purple air monitor, the actual nephelometer, the big air monitor. And below that, it gives a breakdown of what the AQI stuff means. I hope that was all sufficient.
Thank you, Gwen. You did great. I'm going to ask one of our ops chiefs to come up. Who's going to be the lucky guy? So here's the question, and then you guys can decide. One is about the fire intensity. You know, fire burns in a mosaic. Can you give a sense of what it looks like out on the landscape now? And then second question would be, during that burnout of in Division Y, that west part of the fire that we saw an overview of, what does that look like as well, especially around Huckleberry Flats?
Good morning, folks. James Osborne, one of the ops chiefs from P&W Team 3. I've been the field ops. John Tepley, who you've heard from before, has been our planning ops. He's the person that orders the resources and has that sort of operational feel. So In terms of severity across this fire, it's varying, I'll say that. And what I mean by that is areas where you have backing, that back down slope, the severity is limited. A lot of the tree canopy is all still intact, still looks green, and what has burned is the underbrush underneath those trees. In other areas of the fire, when we had those large runs this direction, as well as this direction off to the east, it's high severity. So what you see is standing trees with no limbs that are completely burnt, and everything in that area is moonscaped. And so that varies across the landscape, just depending on how that fire moved through the slope. When we were here last time, we mentioned that direct line that we were working on in Black Creek. This whole particular slope in here was very low intensity because the fire had backed down this. I have not seen this portion since, so not sure if that fire got back up into the canopy when we had those large runs, or if that area was fairly stable, which in my mind, just based on the map, it probably was fairly stable, and most of the movement you saw was through the old fire scar here, the Warner fire scar up on Bunchgrass Ridge from, I think, also the 90s. Down there in Huckleberry Flat area, I'll let you know that is pretty low intensity. We have been doing that aerial firing out of the helicopter for the last number of days, as well as burning along that perimeter there where you see all the different squares with numbers on it. Those are drop points, so that's a parking location that we reference folks to show up and be able to have a meeting or establish, a plan for the day, drop off supplies, things of that nature. So we, with crews, burnt that section out to get the fire down to our control line to be able to lock it in and secure it. So down across that whole stretch through the lower slope of the Huckleberry area, fairly low intensity. Most of the infrastructure in there has not been affected. We've done quite a bit of work in that area in terms of the parking area at the OHV. There may be some signs and things that are like off the trail systems that may have been affected, but the overall infrastructure of Huckleberry OHV area is intact. That being said, the western side of the OHV area is all still intact, usable when this fire's controlled and done. And then the piece to the east that's actually in the perimeter, obviously there'll be snag hazards and other hazards that will need to be mitigated prior to that portion of the OHV being opened at a later date. Up by Huckleberry Mountain where it says Command 1 on the map there, where our repeater tower is, and that's the actual lookout itself. That vicinity, although it's all red, in that aerial firing, we were targeting heavier fuels, kind of jackpot burning, if you will, and allowing those heavier fuels to break up the continuity across that whole, roughly 20,000 acres. So that area right now is not 100% black, but we've taken the punch out of it as it warms back up and we potentially get an east wind event again, to where the probability of it moving out of the perimeter and towards town is so much less compared to what it was before. Thanks.
James, we'll keep you up here for a couple more questions. I'm not sure if you can tell the conditions of the actual trails along Huckleberry Flat. You might, if you can address that, that would be great. And then there was a question regarding Division Tango, what its strategy is, and specifically in protecting Betty Lake.
You may have to zoom into Betty Lake. Oh, I got it there. Okay, I'll start with Division Tango. So like John mentioned, this whole upper elevation is roughly 6,000 feet and higher. I think Fuji Mountain is about 7,200 feet. And so the forecast that we have coming is potentially calling for snow above 6,000 feet. And so that's kind of rolls into our strategy on what we're trying to do here. When this fire was much smaller, you see the H on this is the Fuji Mountain Trail, which is an old historic trail. We did some light control feature in there with hand crews, trying not to disturb the resource value of that historic trail, but identified it, like I said, did some light suppression prep in that particular area when that fire was much smaller. Now that the fire's moved out, that prep work that we did in there isn't substantial enough to hold that as a feature if things warm up and get hot and dry. And so John talked about mechanical equipment in this particular area. And so we've done a ton of scouting in there with ground folks, resource advisors from the local forest, to go out and see how we would want to put that in there to where it protects the resource and we can make it work for the firefighter. And so that would basically be, you know, a dozer line in this particular area. As we get through the lakes in the middle here, it would be a hand line built with crews using pumps, hose lays, and things of that nature back to a piece of equipment line that comes down to that Waldo Lake Road. And then that's all after we see what the weather brings, right? And so if the weather comes in with snow and it parks that fire, and we know we're not going to get warmer temperatures up at that high elevation, we might end up just leaving it there and monitoring it for the future. If things warm back up, we don't get the moisture, we'll go back into that area, implement that line, and most likely do a burn, a back burn in that location to tie that off and secure that, just like we're doing over on the west side. So we're kind of running that fine line of exposure and moisture and time of year and elevation to really drive that strategy home. Back over in the OHV area in particular, trail systems, hard to say. You know, there are quite a few trails in that area of the fire inside the perimeter. Like I mentioned, it's pretty moderate to low fire intensity. So there's areas that have burned where those heavy down logs are, and then there's areas where there's green brush that's still intact, if you will. And so it'll be a mosaic pattern, which is patches of fire, patches of green, and it'll be scattered through that whole area. You know, like I mentioned, the trails themselves will all have to be assessed for hazards prior to that location opening, just because you know it's still a large area of land. Each one of those squares is 640 acres with that grid system, so you know, and also 1 square mile of terrain, and so we'll have to go through that area and make sure it's safe before things open back up.
Thanks, James. A couple more questions for you. There's a question regarding Blue River. Is that in danger again? And then while you're up here, if you could speak to the condition of the John Goddard old growth area.
Okay, Blue River. Are we talking Blue River like in the McKenzie drainage, or if that's a McKenzie River question, Blue River is fine. We've actually made contact with those folks in terms of the McKenzie Canyon and with our liaisons, just to let them know that they're there, and we know that they're there, knowing that they had the Holiday Farm fire, you know, 2 years ago, and that whole drainage corridor, similar to you all, with the effects that you all have been feeling the last couple of years, and just making sure that they're on our radar as well, just knowing that this large fire is on the landscape. If there's another Blue River on the map somewhere that I am not familiar with, please get that comment back into the public information officers, and we can follow up with that offline. So that little donut hole is actually where John Goddard Grove is. We did a ton of work in that area last time we were here 2 weeks ago. We had sprinkler systems down in there to protect those old growth trees, as well as that whole road system where you see the R's on the map in the blue squares. That's the Black Creek Road, or the 2421 road. That was our control feature last time we were here. So there was about 4 weeks of work on the north side of that road system, holding that road there. And so I suspect that this fire came down in our old Division Hotel when we were here, which was a bunch of direct effort. You can see is all the symbology on the map. That fire came down through here and then made that hard push. But you notice the donut hole. I think the sprinklers systems and the work that we had put into there, I would say most of that is intact. We have not been up that road system as of yet due to the snag hazards. Nobody's been back into the interior of the fire at this point. We have it blocked off down on the Salmon Creek Road. And those assessments will be done, well after this fire in terms of potentially opening that road up or closing it for future use just due to the high hazard in that location.
One last question, James. I know John explained our strategy for protecting Oakridge, and Randy mentioned that as well as one of our high priorities. But there is a question about how safe Oakridge is currently.
Well, I'd say at this point, with the pending moisture and the work that we have done up in that division, Yankee, which, along the OHV area and east of High Prairie, locking that piece in over the last number of days was just a valiant effort by our folks and the local firefighters from across the country that are all here. Just a valiant effort to protect the Oakridge community, High Prairie, West Fur. I would forecast that over the next few days, as that continues to move around, we get some moisture that will also allow us to get containment in terms of how our IC Randy Johnson mentioned. We're still showing 0% containment. With the work that we've done, the moisture that's coming, I forecast that whole area in Division Yankee will go black or contained on this fire in the next coming days. As for this lower portion here in X-ray, which is really the crux of what we have left in terms of X-ray, whiskey, and uniform. The Quist fire from last year runs this stretch here and then comes down towards Salmon Creek and back up to a trail system that runs back. So right where Division X is a fire scar. Fire scars that are fresh generally help us out as a control feature. There is some down needle layer in there, but if fire was to get in there, it would be very, very low intensity at this point, unlike what we saw up on the Charlton scar up on the far northeast corner of the fire. And so if fire gets in there, that's another, so-called barrier that we have that we're using here. Our plan is to take this threat out, knowing that we will still have spot fires in here, but we will be able to engage firefighters in that location if something was to get into there. And where I go with that is it leaves a real small portion that's left, part this 58 corridor that is an area for this fire to potentially pathway through to Oakridge. And so over the next coming days with the moisture, after that moisture, kind of fades away, we will still be looking at continuing to burn that piece out to make sure that it's secure, knowing that we've had one east wind event so far, and there's a potential for more. I think average for the Cascade Crest, roughly there's about 5 east wind events is what I've heard from historical data that come through this area as well as the rest of the crest. So not out of the woods like Ian mentioned, but we're doing everything we can to minimize those potential threats on this western front to Oakridge. With that, you'll hear from the sheriff's office like we had mentioned. We're well tied in with the sheriff. If something changes in terms of evacuation levels, that'll come through us as a recommendation to the sheriff, and the sheriff will notify you all.
All right, we had one last question that came in. This will be the last one, I promise. So what are we doing on the northeast corner of the fire to prevent the fire from moving northeast?
Take me to the northeast, Alex, for 500, please. So the northeast, up in our division Delta, as we all know, the Waldo Lake Wilderness, the Three Sisters Wilderness, a large piece of landscape, right, that separates the crest. This particular strategy is still an indirect strategy like we've been doing on the rest of the fire. And we're looking at putting, what we call a catcher's mitt on it for, slang for y'all. So the control system runs up the 19 road, up towards that drop point 589. And then we're working it up towards that command 4, which is a high point where our repeater is at for communications across the fire. And if you see those little R's on the map, it basically runs up towards and out towards the wilderness in terms of allowing space and time, knowing that we're in the middle of September. This is all that high elevation, right? So it's colder, it's wetter, it's moister up here than it is down where we're at now. And so the odds of this fire through modeling and science historical weather data, and all those sort of computer analytics that we have at our disposal. We're utilizing that and the weather to see what this fire may do over the next 6 weeks, if you will, to decide where our control line may go and what we need to do to bolster that, so if fire does come and it does warm back up, that it doesn't come and threaten our line. We will continue to have this piece of fire back down towards that 19 road, and we will also help it back down to the 19 road if need be to get it locked. But we're going to continue to bring that out to the east past Constitution Grove, the other large old growth stand out there, and get that again locked up into this area to limit the potential threat to the values of Oakridge and everything else that's to the west of that piece of fire. Is that it, Stan? That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Appreciate you taking the time there. We'll end the virtual meeting now and move into our open house format. So first of all, just want to thank everybody, especially virtually, who have been hanging in there, and those of you who are here. I know there's a big game today, I think, at about the fire, and we'll hang around here as you have any questions. We've got maps posted up here if you want to go talk around a map. All right, again, thank you very much for your time this morning, and again, continue to, for up-to-date fire information, continue to follow us on NCWeb and our Facebook feed, and give us a call if you have any questions. All right, thank you again.